The euthanasia of a 26-year-old Canadian man named Kiano Favaeian has sparked international shock and outrage online. For the first time since his death under Canada's medical assistance in dying regime, his grieving mother and sister joined me in an interview alongside statements Kiano himself wanted the public to hear. Drea Humphrey here with Rebel News, and recently Margaret Marcilla, Kiano's mother, made this post on Facebook to let the public know that her only son, a diabetic and blind Ontario man with much life ahead of him, was euthanized in British Columbia on December 30th, unbeknownst to his family. Kiano didn't have a terminal illness, but he did struggle with mental health, the same issue several doctors acknowledge, and his mother, with the help of community, used to save Kiano from MAID in 2022, when following pushback, a Dr. Joshua Tepper canceled his previous MAID approval for Kiano. But then Kiano met UBC professor and clinician Dr. Ellen Wiebe.
How many MAID deaths have you been involved with?
Over 400.
That sounds like a lot. Is that what you do now? Is that
No, I still run a contraception and abortion clinic in addition to my MAID work.
400 lives from MAID as of 2024, and no mention of how many performed abortions. Wiebe's expertise involves the most highly contested procedures involving the sanctity of human life, work she takes great pride in doing.
But this is the very best work I've ever done in the last 7 years. And people ask me why. And I think, well, doctors like grateful patients. And nobody is more grateful than my patients now and their families.
Grateful? I don't think the Alberta husband, who was granted an interim injunction by the BC Supreme Court to pause a MAID procedure approved by Dr. Wiebe after his wife's medical team refused it, is grateful. The case, now under appeal, challenges Wiebe's listed qualifying condition for MAID and argues that mental health was the true underlying factor, including distressing side effects from tapering off a psychiatric medication. The husband's claim further alleges that Wiebe failed to consult his wife's psychiatrist before approving her MAID. Kiano's family also isn't grateful and also contests Wiebe's MAID findings that severe physical pain was a genuine factor for Kiano and say mental health was. But before we jump to an interview with Margaret and Kiano's sister, who wished to speak anonymously, I've obtained another important layer of this story, Kiano's own words. Kiano's estate lawyer, Wes Museo of Museo Goodman, reached out to me to explain that Kiano waived solicitor-client privilege before his death so his version of the story could be told. Museo says Kiano first came to his Vancouver office, which happens to be approximately a 10-minute drive away from Dr. Wiebe's clinic, in 2023 and spoke of having diabetes causing blindness and unrelenting peripheral nerve pain in his extremities, similar to the claims he makes in this interview here.
My nerve damage in the endings of my hands and the feet, especially in the wintertime, is very painful. When it's very sensitive to the cold. When I go outside, I don't really feel that it's getting bad. It's really cold. I don't feel that. But as soon as I get inside, it's just severe pain from the temperature change.
Kiano also claimed he was investigating MAID, something Museo says he urged him to seek medical treatment for instead. And while the firm agreed to prepare the will, Kiano didn't follow up. That is, until this past December, when Kiano contacted him making similar claims about wanting MAID. Museo states that as a personal injury lawyer, he's come across peripheral nerve pain issues before and know there are treatments where the nerve pain can be lessened. He counseled against this dramatic approach to a non-terminal condition, strongly suggesting medical treatment. The will was drafted and Kiano came in to sign it on December 30th, which Museo says later surprised him when he learned that that was the same day Kiano had scheduled himself to die. According to Museo, Kiano believed that MAID was unduly restrictive and that if somebody is going through the pain and suffering that he was, it should be available to all. And while Macio personally believes that Canada's expansion of MAID, which allows the state to euthanize someone without a terminal illness, is absolutely disgusting, he is a free speech absolutist and felt that it's honorable to speak on Kiano's wishes despite his opposite moral views. And now, here's Kiano's family story.
He just lit up the room whenever he walked in because of his beautiful smile. He was always accommodating and thoughtful, and his whole life, it seemed that he loved life. He loved life even with diabetes. He was 4 years old when he was diagnosed with diabetes. And I know living with diabetes was very hard. And as a single parent, it was hard having to navigate through this with him. But he wasn't alone. He had his sister, he had me, he had our families. He was always, I sent him to Costa Rica for a diabetes retreat with doctors, and he loved it. He learned the plant-based system for diabetics and how to eat properly using vegan foods and so forth. And he came back with such a powerful strength to want to help diabetics and obviously help himself. Right before COVID, I noticed that there was a decline. He had 4 dogs and he was only taking care of these dogs. He started losing track of taking care of himself. I also noticed that he was really, really, really big on cannabis smoking, even shrooms. He advertised to people that that's what he was doing and that's what he was taking. And it really hurt me because I noticed that every time he would, smoke cannabis, he would become a different person. He just didn't care. He would become numb. Mm-hmm. So obviously, my family and I, we were worried. We were worried about the fact that we started noticing a big change with his mental state, a big change of letting go of not taking care of himself. Even his friends, talking to his friends recently throughout these days, noticed the same pattern that, one of his friends said from having the most friends and girlfriends, he became to having none. It became to having none and nobody.
You say that part of this sort of decline you're describing contributed to that. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
When my husband was preparing his trailer to keep the dogs in for training, my husband started noticing that he was bumping into things. And they would be in that trailer late at night, putting lights on and everything. And then my husband would say to me, you know what? I think there's something wrong with his eyes. He's bumping into things. It's weird. So then right away, I took him to a doctor in Orangeville, and he did say, okay, you really need to go see a doctor for this. It's caused by your diabetes, obviously. You have to go see the doctor. So we went to go see a doctor, and the doctor said, okay, don't worry about it. You can get the 5 laser surgeries. You'll be fine. You just have to focus and get these laser surgeries done. So this is during COVID. So then when we went and I took him into his first appointment for his laser surgery, we walked in there and they said to me right away that I couldn't be in there. So then I took myself outside and my son did his laser surgery, the first one. Obviously, he had these big glasses on and it was going to last throughout I don't know how many hours, 8 hours or so. And he was going home. He was living on his own and he was going home to all these dogs. And I said, Kiano, I'm going to take care of your dogs. I'm going to help you take care of your dogs. I'll stay here with you. He's like, no, mom, don't worry about it. I'm fine. Just go home. I'm fine. So I said, okay, fine. Then his second appointment, his father had taken him. He had to wait outside. Kiano came into the car and pretended that he had gone through his laser. Then the third appointment, I took him and he played the same thing. He went inside. I waited outside for about an hour or so. He came into the car and it was the same thing. Don't worry, mom, I'm fine. I can take care of this. Later on throughout the year, it started getting worse, obviously. And he started telling my husband that he noticed that he was, that there was bleeding, that he saw black spots. That's what he was saying. It was black spots. So we took him to the doctor and that's when he started laying the news about what was happening. It was actually my nephew who had taken him And he heard it with his own ears. He said, and I have a written report from that doctor, that because he missed 4 of his laser surgeries, this is what has happened now. And a doctor said in a written note that I have, that because of that, his it tore. His retina tore,
Okay.
and it was getting worse. We saw a doctor by the name of Dr. Smitty. He was one of the best doctors there, and I wanted my son to meet the best doctor there. And he too said the same thing. It's, unfortunately, your right eye is unrepairable. Sorry, the left eye, not the right. It's not repairable. You have retina damage, and this is what it is. So the doctors here at St. Mike's tried to save his left eye, and they were doing a good job. But it also meant for Kiano to do his part. And because of his mental illness that he's demonstrated in front of all of us, I kept on declining. And even though during this time he was talking about MAID, and understanding that MAID was available and how MAID is around, and that started coming up, the more I started noticing this pattern of smoking so much and taking drugs and fighting with everyone. Then the next step was him started talking about MAID. And we were like, yeah, okay, whatever. We would throw it away. And he did a project on it, and he was getting more curious about it. And then he started talking more and more a little bit before his eyesight that I found out. And then during the process of losing his eyesight, he started talking about MAID. So we had no idea, because this is about months, if not over a year, of him talking about MAID and being interested in MAID. But none of us had no indication at all that this kid, for diabetes and blindness, he would get accepted. Nor did we ever think that mental illness could have been on the plate for MAID at all. I have some medical reports from my son from different doctors, and I've obviously highlighted a lot of important parts that not only gives us as a family an indication of how improper this approval was. Like I said before, I mentioned this one doctor did say that, please note that referral for MAID assessment for Kiano Favaeian has been declined. Please contact the Ontario MAID coordination with a number. So that was available to him. And a doctor said, I'm not going to approve you for MAID. You don't qualify. I'm declining you. But here's the number that the people might approve you. Does that make sense there? Then there's another one that this situation in this patient does not fit the typical picture of a patient who would be approved for MAID. I had a conversation with palliative care, who agreed that this was an unusual situation. This is from another doctor. I have another one that says Kiano Favaeian is a patient of mine being treated for depression. I understand that there are pending criminal charges which have contributed to a worsening of his depressive symptoms. And that's going back on his psychotic behavior under psychosis because of drugs and so forth. This was actually back in 2023. And he had a slew of charges because of his behavior out in public. Another doctor said that it will be worthwhile having him seen by psychiatric service here, considering his threat to harm himself by refusing to take his insulin at home.
Wow.
I think that was one way that he thought that maybe he would be able to get approved if he doesn't take his insulin, which to my knowledge, that's never happened. He was always on top of his insulin. And in fact, he showed me his A1Cs a few months ago that they were fine. So that's something else that I need to look into. This is another report, another information from a doctor about my son. And in his report, it says, I do wonder if there is an element of self-sabotage involved in the fact about the possible cluster B personality traits.
Wow.
Now, I've Googled obviously what the cluster B personality traits. My daughter and I went through it. She's a nurse as well, and can fit all of those cluster B personality traits. And this, which obviously the doctor, we've never went into detail about my sons, and it's quite sad that she never even went into detail about his first approval and how and if she ever dissected it with Dr. Tepper, and if impossible they might have worked even together on this. There's something else here that says we do not obtain collateral information about this, but there might be slight paranoid edge about it. So that's another doctor. Another doctor here says that Mr. Favaeian appears to be experiencing an adjustment disorder. He has had a prior diagnosis of ADHD and a diagnosis of major depressive disorder, has been considered by Ryder and other physicians. However, while his desire for MAID may, on the surface, it's appeared to be consistent with MDD, which is the major depressive disorder.
Wow.
So that's another doctor saying that.
So you just read from several doctors, it sounds, saying, no, we're not going to approve him for MAID. They gave multiple reasons that indicate that he had mental health issues. So what is going through your mind as a mother then when you find out retroactively that your son is gone from this earth and Dr. Wiebe approved that?
It's extremely hard. There's no amount of words that I can express right now. That's, the anger that's running through my veins. I'm not even mourning my son properly because I'm so upset that this woman, she's taken my son away from me. And it hasn't hit me, the fact that he's not here as much, because I've been so angry at her. I've been so angry at the government, at the system of allowing this. And it hasn't naturally affected me in my heart as much because I'm so upset. And I don't know what it will do to me once it does affect me. I'm scared that I'm not going to be able to work again. I'm scared I'm not going to be able to get out of my bed anymore because I've worked so hard for my son and to save his life. She took away, we celebrated, my little girl turned 11 today, and she couldn't have me there with her singing proper happy birthday to her like we all did, because I'm mourning and I'm trying to mourn the loss of my son. Meanwhile, I'm trying to get the point across to people out there, the government out there, the doctor out there who's done this to my son. And what she's done was wrong. And because I'm so angry, I feel that this is the only time I can get this message across, because once it actually seeps so deep into my heart as to what actually happened and how my son's not going to come back home, I'm afraid that I won't be able to talk to anybody anymore.
Now, I know you guys are going to continue looking into this. You're taking this matter very passionately in effort to try to save others from what you believe is an injustice that happened to Kiano. You're also aware that Kiano's estate lawyer, Wes Museo, has reached out to me. Kiano, according to the lawyer, had stated when he came into their office around 2023, about a year, I guess, after this happened with the other doctor backing out, he, at that point, for sure, claimed, in addition to the diabetes, that he was having unrelenting pain in his extremities from nerve pain. And we also know that Dr. Wiebe, who we've covered, saying that the cause of death was MAID, but also severe peripheral neuropathy. I'm going to throw to Kiano's sister for this. What do you make of those claims? Was he suffering? Was he in pain this whole time?
I think it's important to note that, living with him, seeing him on a daily basis, he also left us all of his medical records, right? So we looked through them all with a fine-tooth comb, and never once through all of his hospital visits, through all of his family doctor visits, did he ever have a chief complaint of peripheral nerve myopathy. And that's not to say that he wasn't in pain, but for a claim to be an excuse for him to die with severe peripheral nerve myopathy, it was never a complaint in his medical records. And in addition, he had saved for us all of the prescriptions that she had written for him, Alan Wiebe, including insulin, Vyvanse, like an antibiotic for him, basic medications for him, but none of them addressed this nerve pain. He had not a single medication prescribed by Ellen Wiebe for nerve pain. So it's kind of disturbing to hear that, that was the main reason that he was approved for MAID, but she never tried to treat it, ever.
Had he come to me and had he said, Mom, this is really bad, my hands, my feet, or anything, I would have known, I would have done whatever I could have possibly have done. When you told us yesterday and you showed us the reason why, it was a big surprise to us. Huge surprise that was his main complaint, because it never, ever was with us. Never. And that's not to say, because shortly after I saw that, I had communicated with his friends and I asked, did Kiano ever complain about this? Did Kiano ever, make it known to you guys? And they're like, Margaret, we walked downtown for hours. Not once did he say, stop, my feet hurt. Not once did he say, I've got such nerve pain. Now, that's not to say, I know diabetics do go through this, and because my mother was type 2 diabetic, and I understand that it does affect the nerves. I understand it does affect, but to say severe and a reason to kill somebody, that's crazy. This kid obviously was suffering, and it was just, he was not allowing himself to get mental help with proper medication because he was so focused and adamant to get MAID, especially the second time around, because the first doctor approved him and he worked so hard to get that. And then he went the second time around. And the focus was that his mind was taken over about this MAID being approved here in Canada and how he wanted it and how he's going to trick the system to get it. And he did. He was laughing.
The essence of it is that he got approved the first time. And if he had never been approved in the first place, if this wasn't even an option for him, he would have been forced to take care of himself and focus his energy on getting proper mental help and fixing his life. But instead, he was focusing all of his energy on getting approved for MAID.
And just the fact that he said that comment alone to the lawyer, that he is for MAID and all of this, and he wants the media to know, you can tell is for that he had an agenda to show everybody how easy it was to get approved. I know my son, I know his strengths. When he fights for something and he goes full force, he's good at winning it. You can tell. Obviously, he got approved twice amongst how many reports of doctors saying that he shouldn't have been approved. So he found doctors that went through the loopholes and approved him. And Kiano, throughout the years, I'm assuming starting from 2022, 2023, 2024, he would go to the hospitals on purpose, because if he had mentioned in the hospitals that he had nerve pain, I'm sure the hospitals would have written it down and giving him prescriptions for pain, right? He never did that. So I believe, my theory, I'm being skeptical right here, but if he was in contact with Dr. Wiebe since 2023, since he was in Vancouver talking to that lawyer, then why was it noted in any hospital records here since 2023, 2024, that he was suffering nerve pain? Why did any doctor give him that? Why was it only that Dr. Wiebe at the end gave him the approval of MAID because of that nerve pain? Why?
Why? So many questions, and without hearing back from Dr. Wiebe, some insight into Margaret's question about why a doctor wouldn't have just prescribed pain meds to Kiano could potentially be found here.
That they can skip the last 2 days of their life. And I look at it and think, what you really needed was some more drugs, but you want my drugs, I'll give them to you.
Kiano's family is convinced Wiebe found a loophole to give Kiano what he was asking for instead of the mental health help many believe he needed. But they're not the only ones who think a loophole may have contributed to Kiano's death. Musio, his lawyer, says that after reviewing the information about the Liberal government's MAID regime, he personally doesn't believe anything illegal took place. But he does think his firm may have been getting worked during Kiano's pursuit to get MAID. Immediately after Kiano's surprise death, his firm was sent an email from Dr. Wiebe enclosing Kiano's death certificate, along with emails from the cremation center regarding how to make payments and gather personal items. This led Macio to come to the speculative conclusion that since Kiano's family was in the dark, Kiano required an executor as a point of contact in order to get MAID administered at the funeral home. Macio states that because of his religious beliefs and conscience, there is no way he would have become the executor of Kiano so he could get MAID. He notes his firm writes thousands of affordable wills and does not typically investigate why someone wants them, and that it would have been nice to have known that his firm was being used to facilitate a highly controversial termination of life. By the spring of next year, the Liberal government plans to expand its Radical MAID program to Canadians suffering solely from mental illness. And just this week, parliamentary recommendations included extending it to mature minors. This must stop. To help expose what the MAID system could soon be doing to one of your loved ones, please watch and share our documentary at maiddocumentary.com.